Hi, I'm Kyle Abraham, Artistic Director of AIM by Kyle Abraham, and I'm also the endowed professor in residence here at the Gloria Kaufman School of Dance.
And you're about to have a really big week in Los Angeles because you're about to have two pieces in the same week at two venues, and which is what we're here to talk about. Why don't you tell us what that week entails for you and what those two pieces are?
Sure, yeah. First performance will be on February 15th here at the USC campus in the Bovard Auditorium, a work called An Untitled Love. It's all set to the music of D'Angelo, really honoring just love in a lot of ways and honoring not only my parents, who are no longer with us, but also those aunts and uncles that helped raise me. And then on the 18th, I come to your beautiful theater, the Soraya Theater, and present a work of ours called Requiem, Fire in the Air of the Earth, which is my kind of take on Mozart's Requiem, but through the lens of electronic composer Jay Lin.
When did you decide to take Mozart and put it in the hands of a really incredible musician?
I was drawn to the Requiem. And Jay Lin instantly came to mind for me. I've loved her music for years, and it really sparked this other important puzzle piece to this work. Like, how was my Requiem going to be different from all the others that came before it? And one of the ways that I thought I'd approach it, especially with her music in particular, was thinking about ideas of reincarnation or afterlife, or even going into not only different kind of folklores and mythology, but also ideas of Black futurism. And I felt like that created a great kind of groundwork and foundation for us to kind of create, and for my other collaborators like Dan Scully, who has been a longtime lighting and scenic design collaborator of mine for years, and Giles Deacon, who's doing the costumes, who I first collaborated with at New York City Ballet for The Runaway several years ago.
When I think of Mozart's Requiem, one of the things I think of is it was an unfinished piece. Mozart died, the piece wasn't finished, it was subsequently finished. There's some mystery about, how much Mozart had actually written or not. So I particularly think about the early phrases of that Requiem, and the Kyrie is, of course, one of the most famous, of Mozart's music, among so much famous music. I think about that, and then, who knows at what point during the Requiem it becomes not his anymore. And it sort of just gave you permission to just take it and make it yours. And the whole first section is the Kyrie, and then it ends, and then Jay Lin steps in and takes over. And it literally is a transition moment where you sit back in your seat and you're like, oh, I'm in for something totally different. Tell me a little bit about the conversation with Jay Lin about the sections and what she was supposed to do with Mozart.
Well, sure, but I think I want to address even just what you're saying, right? Because it's a little bit of a good inside scoop, but it's that thing that, like, if you're really familiar with Mozart's Requiem, basically right where we're cutting in is where he finished for the most part. So that was very purposeful. And it's kind of playing with my humor in a way. Just like, I can be a little bit of a geek, so putting those textures in there. And what Jay Lin is actually doing, if you're really listening to the way in which she's layering her music and her sound design, is by thinking about how that score would continue to grow and evolve over time.
In Requiem, you seem to bounce between parallel universes. Is it structured kind of in a way that Mozart's Requiem is structured? Because it feels very highly delineated by chapters.
There is a nod or a moment when we come back to the Requiem, but I kind of, in a way that I'm an extreme kind of Marvel universe fan, I'm thinking about, one of the dancers as Nightcrawler, and someone who can kind of just kind of shoot themselves from one environment to another, or some planet to another, and make that space. So there's moments where that kind of idea is happening. And when you think about who that kind of character is in our show, in this performance, you'll see Jamal Bowman, but I think about that person as this person that's switching the kind of sound score and the music every time it shifts.
Your humanity is also always present in the piece. And, like a Requiem, there's a spiritual component. I want you to talk about that. And then there's also just the reminder of the sort of the delicacy of the human condition. And I think it ends the way I sort of think of Mozart's Requiem ending, with a sense of closure. So talk about those two things. Talk about the spiritual component of the piece. Talk about the humanity of the piece.
Sure. I think one of the big things that drew me to making this work in particular was a lot of my kind of fascination, whether or not it be healthy or not, with death. Having lost both of my parents and still kind of grappling with that. Ironically, my mother passed away the year that I moved to Los Angeles in 2016. And it's something that I'm still struggling with. But making this work, it allowed me to kind of dive into this idea in a totally different way, because it wasn't solely about death, but really the questions that I have about what happens next. And in a way that also relates with not only mythology, Greek mythology perhaps, but also thinking about the Yoruba religions and thinking, okay, well, what would happen if Oshun and Minerva had a conversation? So thinking about someone that's thinking about birth and life, and someone that's thinking about justice and peace and war. What happens if they're in conversation?
This was an awesome conversation. We are so pleased to have you at the Soraya in a couple of weeks.
Thanks.
Thanks for spending Mozart's birthday, a little bit of it, with me today here in the studios of the Gloria Kaufman School of Dance. And just thanks, Kyle. And I hope this is a really big week for Los Angeles to get to see you represented by two pieces. Thanks.
I hope so. I hope they come and see both of these crazy worlds.
Me too.